Mi gente, we are back here with Garza, Gaitan, and the game. So much to cover on today's episode. We're going to be talking everything, all things tariffs. We're going to be talking about tariffs in relations to all of the countries that have been approaching Donald Trump and trying to negotiate what the path forward is. And then on China, there's a lot going on in this space. There's a lot in the balance. We're also going to be talking about a new book in which revelations come out about the heartbroken, the position that Jill Biden essentially forced Joe Biden around the presidential election. We're going to be going back and forth to see what are the pros and cons there. What do Democrats need to learn? Because it's not seeming like they are really learning, but we're going to be going through all of these things here on this episode with Daniel Garza. Daniel, how's it going? How are you doing?
I don't know, Wadi. I feel underdressed, to be honest with you.
Spit
I
up a
gotta
bit,
step up
man.
my
You're always the
game.
one looking great. I gotta compete with you a little bit.
Yeah, talking about the game, man. I gotta step up my game here, man, because it doesn't feel right to be underdressed.
All
So,
right, that's the key takeaway. Everyone's going to be tuning into the next episode, not just for the
sure, man.
content, but to see for the fashion wardrobe from Daniel Garza. But let's get into it. Let's drive right into what we saw the game in this week. Look, the continuation of the discussion around tariffs. One, there's been a lot that folks have been talking about the stock market. There's been individuals like Jamie Dimon stepping up to talk with Donald Trump about what they're seeing. There's a lot of reports about countries coming to the table after, again, the famous press conference that Donald Trump gave, where he says that they're putting tariffs essentially on every country. There's been everything from memes of penguins being sort of burdened with tariffs now in different countries. But it's not all jokes and games. This is something serious. There's a mission behind what Donald Trump is doing here. Daniel, actually, let me start with this. What's your takeaway? What are your thoughts? What is Donald Trump really striving to here? And is he getting there? Where are we in the road to the future in this space?
Well, Wadi, look, fundamentally, and he has said this once and again, that he wants fair trade, right? He wants to make sure that there is reciprocity, is one of his favorite terms that he likes to throw out. And a lot of Americans agree with him. I think the observation from many of us has been one of amazement as to how much other countries were abusing that export-import relationship with the United States, that they had these extremely high tariffs, and we had almost no tariffs, going against other countries. Now, obviously, the idea for Trump is to get to zero tariffs for everybody. And so when we talk about fair trade, it's not like 70%, with Bolivia and 70% with us, and that's fair. No, the idea is to bring everything down to zero. And that is, of course, the optimal, fair trade. And that's where all libertarians and conservatives would agree is where we want to be, right? Because in the end, tariffs are a tax on the consumer. And it's, we, the consumers in America, even though, we like choice, we like low prices, when tariffs are imposed, all it does is increase prices, right? And the revenues go to the government. And of course, Trump would argue that even if tariffs were to be imposed at a high rate, 30% to 30%, let's just say, that one, it would increase revenues to the government. And second, it would also increase or induce manufacturing.
Yeah, it's a bumpy road to get to that point, because I think there's a lot of folks who historically, when they talk about free trade, they talk about the importance of eliminating tariffs. And many are analyzing what Trump is doing as sort of the opposite. He's not eliminating tariffs. If anything, he's elevating them. But what we're hearing from some from the White House, what we're hearing from his Secretary of Commerce, is that this is a way to actually achieve a better, more fair, more reduced tariff level playing field for the United States. I've heard some commentary that because a lot of people are looking at history, right? How do we analyze what we're seeing now? What's difficult of this is that Trump is moving away from a system that we've had almost for 80 years now. But this system kind of, for many years, the U.S. almost like allowed these countries to put tariffs on us without us saying anything, almost as a way of expanding sort of capitalism and saying, will these countries, the more that they're able to produce, the more that they're able to trade with us, are they able to grow in this space, to be more capitalist, to be more sort of a partners to us? But Trump is saying we're coming to a point where we should have pushed back, where it's been a long time and where some of these countries haven't moved, and where there's a limitation, a barrier on a lot of our products. A lot of people talk about Australia, where we don't have a trade deficit, but there's still a barrier. The U.S. cannot sell, period. If I'm not mistaken, it's beef and other meat products into Australia. So a lot of those barriers exist. At the end of the day, Daniel, I want to focus a little bit on probably the biggest, when we talk about this sort of tariff war, sort of that biggest contrincante, that biggest rival, and that's China. Look, the U.S. has approximately about an $18 trillion buying power. China, although they have over 1 billion people, does not come not even to half of that. I believe they're at 8 trillion in their buying power. They're really more of an exporter than a consumer. Does the U.S. kind of have the upper hand going in your opinion, and what is going to be possibly a very difficult back and forth with China? How do you view this sort of ongoing or start of this sort of tariff war with China?
Well, I do believe that the United States has the upper hand because we are a massive economy. I mean, the economies of New Jersey and New York are bigger than the entire economy of Russia. Texas is bigger than France, and California is bigger than Mexico's economy. I mean, that's how big we are, right? In the sense that it is a privilege to have access to America's markets, right? To America's consumers. And it now Trump is saying it comes at a price. You're not going to abuse us anymore, right? You're not going to take advantage of us, is what he's saying. One of the dangers, before I get to China, though, Wadi, is that there's a lot of folks that are saying that because of Doge, that is restraining spending, because of new reforms that are again going to restrain government spending as well. The Republicans now in charge. This tariff war. It may stifle productivity, is what they're saying, right? And so, when you put it, a destabilization, an uncertainty, then we've seen the results, and this is the markets freaking out, right? That we don't know what the rates are going to be with different countries and different consumers, and we don't know if these and trade and buying and procurement, everything that happens, with government spending. And so, but already we're seeing that the markets recover because the U.S. trade representative has mentioned, as you were referring to, that over 70 countries, are now knocking on our door, waiting to. And this, of course, has brought back certainty, has brought back, folks that are motivated about, what is happening in our economy. Okay, maybe it's not going to be so bad, right? Maybe Trump's plan is genius here, right? He's been playing 4D chess. And so, maybe we are going to get to reciprocity, with so many countries. But to your point, the one country that, of course, feels that they can retaliate and punch back and play the bully is China. And to me, Wadi, it's just fascinating to see how China thinks that they are strong enough to try and bully the U.S. into submission, right? On this war on tariffs, and they're showing their hand here, right? That they are really a threat to America in a way that they are not our friends, Wadi. They don't share our values. They don't share our way of governing. Share our governing principles. It is very much a top-down government. They control everything. It is a state-run capitalist country in the sense that it's state-imposed, right? And they control all information, and they've grown their economic might with the full intention of feeding their military might to leverage it against the U.S. and their friends. And so it's been just really fascinating to see now on this trade war that they are the only ones that are retaliating and have escalated, this battle, to increase tariffs. But Trump is punching back, And,
Yeah.
and Trump knows he has the weight to do it. And only America right now can bring China to heel when it comes to these kind of market issues, economic issues, and isolate China from the rest of the countries and show that they are the folks they know who would seek to abuse, to continue to abuse the relationship, not only with America, but with everybody else. China seeks to impose. They don't seek to trade it with fairness or any kind of equal balance. They want to dominate the world, and if the world allows them, they would bring the world to heel. And so I think that this war on tariffs has really exposed China for who they are.
100%. The conversation on China is very nuanced. I will say that this is commentary that I heard. I don't know all the nuances behind it, but this individual was sort of talking long term, right? The United States, if we're facing these immense tariffs from China, that means a lot of these products would go up in prices. The difference here is that in many of these products, the US consumer sort of has the option to just say, I'm not going to buy, right? I'm not going to buy the iPhone that's now $5,000. But what he was saying is actually interesting. He says, what's the impact on the Chinese side? He says, what are you going to do when millions of your workers don't have jobs because people aren't buying goods? And all of a sudden, your economy is tanked because people are without work. What kind of role will the government, again, like you mentioned, it's a top-down government. Are they going to start sort of doing bailouts? Are they going to start sort of paying folks who are not working? So, I mean, there's a lot going on, not just on the
But
U.S. side.
that's
China.
what they've done, right? They are using right now Keynesian economics to try to reset the economy because they are in an economic downturn right now. They built entire cities that nobody went to.
Yeah, they're empty.
And they're now they're using a wrecking ball to bring during the heydays of these halcyon days of their economic upturn. And now that things have gone haywire, they chose to retaliate against the number one consumer of all their crap. Because let's be honest here. Everything you buy from China is not quality. And and I don't care if it's a nail clippers to a coffee machine to a bicycle, right? It doesn't last long. Maybe that's why you buy it, right? Because it's cheap because it's it's cheap in price because it's cheap in quality.
Yeah.
But like they say, in the Mexican saying, lo barato te cuesta caro, right? Whatever you buy cheap in the long term is going to turn out expensive. Because you're gonna have to keep buying it over and over again. When instead, if you buy an American-made quality product, it's gonna last you a long time.
Yeah, Daniel, again, I heard some commentary this week, an article that I was reading. To me, probably made probably one of the most important case when it comes to this battle with China. And a lot of it is that the United States, a lot of where we're headed when it comes to artificial intelligence, or even where we're at now, we need more energy power. There's these blackouts, these brownouts. I mean, there's a lack of energy. We need more energy, not less energy in the United States. The same thing when it comes to technology manufacturing. And the thing is, a lot of these technologies, especially when it comes to the chips, are actually made in China. So
Yeah.
there's a level of dependency that the US has on China to be able to give us these chips for these technologies that we have. So there is, I think, almost like a national security conversation that needs to be had. And, I'm not the expert to say that tariffs is 100% the way how we solve this, but there is a need for the US to put a focus in these spaces. Our drones should not have to rely on parts that come from China when it comes to warfare. Our energy production, if we're really going to move into the
And
21st
this is
century.
one of those areas where I sort of disagree with libertarians a bit, because they talk about, well, that's their comparative advantage. That's what they do best. Let them do it. No, when you're talking about, national security and our dependence on China, that is not a dependence that I want anything to do with, right? And so the answer to that is, of course, domestic manufacturing, which is why, Donald Trump was quick to announce this multi-billion-dollar investment that is being done here in America, to produce microchips, here in the U.S., so that we have control of these highly important, highly sensitive, pieces of technology, right? That are needed to power our machines, our computers, AI, and everything else. No, you're absolutely right, Roddy. This is one of those issues where China should not have an upper hand on us when it comes to technology and microchips and AI at all.
Yeah, and there's a lot in this topic. Not to be repetitive on the nuances of it, the other in that article was talking about that a lot of people were criticizing Trump. I forget the name of the island, but it's the meme with all the penguins, and people were laughing at why did the White House just put a 30% tariff, on these
A
islands.
Myanmar or something, or
Yeah. The
yeah,
commentary, the article was saying, if I'm not mistaken, it's a Wall Street Journal article, was talking that many countries in the past, China specifically, has a record of shipping items to other countries, playing a little bit of fastball when it comes to the
right.
paperwork. Now it's made in this new place, and
Yep,
now it comes in without tariffs or at a very low tariff. And what the White House was doing was just like covering their bases,
that's right.
closing all the loopholes, not allowing people to try to get funny and try to ship to these places where they can escape the tariffs. They were kind of getting ahead of the ball game. So there's a lot of moving pieces here. It's something that I think we should all, as a country, be cheering for us to really end up in a good place. Will there
That's
be a bumpy road? I don't doubt it. I think there might be a time where we're going to have to be, working on our savings, being sort of more effective on our budgets. But at the same time, we should be cheering for the U.S. to come out on top of this. We should not be cheering for the administration to fail, because if the administration fails, it's really the United States to fail. I think the American public, I think one thing that makes us so different across the world is that entrepreneurship. This is the moment that we should be leaning in. And how do we, in what's an economic war, how do we invent that new product here in the United States? How do we start working on those chips,
great.
on win the war when it comes to artificial intelligence? I think time after time, that's what's resulted of the United States coming out on top. That spirit of entrepreneurship, that spirit of sort of American exceptionalism. We can make it, we can do it, we can build it, because we as a people are free, and we can. We have the talent to be able to do that here in the United States. I think we'll be able to
Here.
reach that
Yeah,
point.
absolutely. Why do you thought this stuff through, right? This has been a very deliberate tactical game by the Trump administration. I'm confident that in the end, we will have lower tariffs than what we have today. With I don't know how many countries, I can't guess, but in net, we will have lower tariffs that we will have to pay, or that consumers in foreign countries will have to pay for our products, right? So I think that would induce more productivity coming to the U.S., more products and services being exported, and that's good for us. That's good for the country, and that's good for the other countries, because of course those consumers get cheaper prices from American products and services. This is good, right? Is that what is it? No two countries with McDonald's have ever gone to war or something like
Yeah,
that. I mean, it talks
sounds
about,
familiar.
yeah, the importance of economic relationships, trading, being economic partners, interdependency, on products and services. Why would you risk that? And so people tend to negotiate and use diplomacy before they, of course, head off to war.
Yeah, very much so. Daniel, this is a topic that's not going away anytime soon. We're going to
No.
continue to analyze it here on the game. But another thing that came out this week is a book that really has a lot of information about last year's campaign, specifically when it comes to Joe Biden. For some people, they see it as a mystery. They see that they still are sort of unaware of the state that Joe Biden was really in. And for others of us, it was very clear that Joe Biden was not in a position to debate. He was not in a position to continue running the country. He was not in a position to be the next president of the United States. But the question that some people were blinded to is who then is pushing all the levers, is moving all the levers. This book comes on to say that folks that have interviewed staff from the White House, that have had conversations with extended family members of the Biden family, talk about Jill Biden really being that power in making sure that Joe Biden stayed as a candidate, that she was really pushing him and pushing the staff to say that Joe Biden was in a position to be president, that there were no mishaps, that there was nothing going on behind the curtain. Really, how do you characterize the fact that when it's Jill Biden that the Democrat Party really got in line behind this cover up that Joe Biden was in a good position to be the next president of the United States.
Well, Wadi, I mean, other than being absolutely irresponsible with the American people, man, it's almost a crime, that you would usurp the power that was vested in Joe Biden to to yourself and your underlings, the White House staff who basically usurp the decision rights of the executive, and run roughshod over, somebody whose physical and mental state was on a decline, is almost abusive. I mean, look, I think what these books and all these other folks who are starting to report this shows is that there were people, and don't get me wrong, before I say this, I'm sure that there are folks like this on the Republican side as much as there are on the Democrat side, but these folks just happen to be in control of the White House.
Mm-hmm.
And it's people who do not think of what is in the best interest of the United States, who do not respect the protocols of power of the executive, who are drunk on power themselves because they got to move the levers in the machine of the commanding heights of the federal government, and were basically in love with all its trappings and refused to give it up. I mean, that's what you were seeing, right? That's why nobody said, Mr. President, maybe you shouldn't run again. I think this is where we're at. This is, you're in a diminished state. This is going to be taxing for you. Other folks are starting to, move in on decision making, and it's not in the interest of the country, right? But what happened was, in the end, they were going to continue this game of coordinating the president's activities highly, and deliberately, planning everything out where they would try to minimize any kind of acts of spontaneity with the president and the press. No questions that were not predetermined. You go to A, move to B, and come back to C, and then event over, right? Everything was going to be controlled. It was like, what was that, Vacation at Bernie's? I forget that movie that it's called, right? Where you have
Weekend at Bernie's, is it?
Weekend at Bernie's, where you have this diminished figure, and they're trying to prop him up, but they got exposed, Wadi. They got exposed really bad. Jill could not control the debate, is basically what happened, right? Or the White House staff.
Yeah.
And that's when when Biden, of course, got exposed, and there was no more denying what we had all been seeing, right? That was obvious, if all the staff people and all the president's men who were trying to continue the charade were also exposed. And so now all these words and these books and articles and reports, and they're now running to the microphone and try. It all rings hollow, because none of these people were saying this when it was happening in real time. Yeah. Right? It's now after the fact that Joe Biden is out of power, that these people have lost their titles and their positions in the White House, and that they are no longer ensconced in the trappings of the luxury of 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue cells and with the public, right? It just save it and shove it.
Daniel, when we talk about the cover-up of Joe Biden during the presidential campaign, there are two groups that really stand out to me. Is one, those in the Democrat Party who played a role in the cover-up, and then I really think the media. There was an interview where Chuck Todd recently said that he believes, they were asking him, why is it that the media did not really report on this in a very aggressive way? Even if it was questioning, maybe they couldn't, without a shadow of a doubt, say that he wasn't qualified and that he wasn't mentally there. Maybe they couldn't say it. But why didn't they push harder in questioning? Why didn't they challenge? That is their role. And something that stood out to me that Chris Todd said is that he says there was a little bit of a fear, that he believes there's a little bit of the fear from the media that any kind of sort of attack on Joe Biden would be a help to Donald Trump. But I would challenge that thinking as erroneous, in the sense that your job of the media is not to worry if you sort of challenge one person, if it helps the other or not. You should be chasing, is it something true? Is something newsworthy and relevant that the public of the United States should be aware of? to me, that shows a bias that many times the media says is not there, right? If they're saying this might help Donald Trump, they're saying that's a negative then, right? And they're saying this will make sort of Joe Biden look bad. They're saying that's a negative. Well, they
Man,
shouldn't be worrying about that.
you just triggered me, Waddy, because this is the one area that frustrates me to no end. Look, first, let me say this. The media, it is obvious, have picked a side, right? They are enhancing the voice of the side that they pick, and they try to demonize or diminish the voices of the side that they're against. Now, guess which side they picked?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I don't even have to say it, right?
Yep.
And so what happens when you do that, when you have, I forget what the latest study was, that 97% of all journalists are Democrats or something. By the way, that's the side that they picked. And there's like a super few, conservative journalists or editors for that sake. I think at NPR there was like 85 Democrats who were editors and 0 Republicans.
Yeah. Yep.
I mean, Dios mío. So here what you have is now a large group of influential people who buy ink by the barrel, like they say, who control the narratives across the country, who are writing their stories to prop up, to conceal, to promote, it's basically propaganda on the side of one party, and what they've become is propagandists, partisan hacks, basically, and have turned on half of America and write articles to try to, as Chuck Todd was saying, God forbid we help the narratives of that prop up Donald Trump, as like you say, as if that's the game here, right? Is that their fear is that they are going to go against a party that they've chosen, and so that is not your role. It's why you're losing the trust of America. It's why the favorability or what, I forget what the poll is of journalists is at an all-time low.
Yep.
You've been exposed, and you continue to double down on deceit, on propaganda. And so you've lost the trust of Americans, and you continue once and again. I mean, the Russian collusion thing, the Joe Biden, thing, the COVID situation, the covering for Joe Biden, or I should say, the son,
Hunter Biden.
the Hunter Biden laptop. I mean, just issue after issue after issue where you took a side or where you covered up, or but God forbid Donald Trump say something, that's a little bit, I don't know,
Fuzzy.
but he didn't mean what he said.
Yeah.
They jump all over the man at an instant, to try to just nail him, right? And so people see it, man.
Yeah.
Continue to do it. And I guess that really just triggers me to no end, Waddy.
Yeah, and what they've done is they've created really the space for folks like the Ben Shapiros and the Charlie Kirks. I mean, folks are now saying there's really this, especially I would say from that next generation, where legacy media, they really see the bias. They're tired of being told what they see is obviously wrong. It is obvious. You see the debate that Joe Biden, even prior to that, I mean, he was sort of falling out of not out of the plane, but sort of he was struggling on the stairs.
There was no denying.
There was no denying of it. Daniel, let me ask you, in this sort of train of thought, let's not, let's also look at the fact Donald Trump is also older. Obviously, his sort of level of energy and his capacity is completely different. But the truth is he will, once he retires from the White House, be one of the oldest presidents to have served. Do you think there's going to be sort of this, I don't want to call it a correction, but a new wave coming in the next election? Because on the Democrat side, they had Joe Biden, one of the oldest presidents, and now Donald Trump, one of the older president. Do you think there's going to be that appetite for new leadership, for sort of the J.D. Vances of the world, for the Hakeem Jeffries on the Democrat side? Will those sort of new generation, will they have an advantage, or do you think Americans will still look for sort of that older statesman or stateswoman that brings sort of those years of experience?
Yeah, I don't know if that's going to change because Donald Trump is old, right? It was never about the age; it was about the mental acuity of the person in power. Look, let's admit it. Ronald Reagan, by the end of his term, was already starting to diminish a bit. I mean,
Mhm.
there were times when Nancy Reagan had to step in and answer questions for him. Everybody saw it, right? It wasn't as bad as Joe Biden, but you could already see that he was starting to trail off a little bit. He wasn't the same by the eighth year of his presidency, and he was really old. Donald Trump, for some energy, still has this mental acuity.
Mhm.
I don't question. I see that the guy is operating at a whole different level than the rest of us are. I mean, he is an above average energy guy. I mean, I would tell you different if I saw something different, but I don't. You can agree or disagree with his politics, but
Mhm.
his energy level is
Yeah.
off the chart.
So you don't think that necessarily the fact that he is older, the next election is not that folks will have this stronger appetite for sort of younger folks, right? So it's not that JD Vance comes in possibly as an advantage because he's young. If he comes in, people are still going to be looking for like, what's your experience? What's your resume? There isn't
Yeah,
going to be sort of this
the one
auto-correction,
example,
overcorrection.
that I can point to where you may have a case was, after Eisenhower, John F. Kennedy comes in,
Mm-hmm.
this young, good-looking, very appealing man, who spoke of a different direction and a vision of Camelot, for America. Um, but I just think it's the person who best captures the zeitgeist of America at the time, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
like who can, has their finger on the pulse, and it was the right person for the right time. And I don't know if age has anything to do with it. Look, JD Vance is very young, and maybe people will swing back to a younger generation of leadership. I don't know. I don't think that
Yeah.
necessarily does it. I think it has everything to do with the character of the person,
Mm-hmm.
and if that person again captures the zeitgeist of the time.
Very much interesting topic. Speaking sort of young generations, what do you make of Jared Kushner and Ivanka Trump, who had key roles in the administration? That 2016 to 2020 cycle, and now sort of step back, said they wanted to focus, on their families and on their business. What's sort of your take on the fact they could have been that new wave of young leadership, of young leaders?
Yeah, look, first let me say I think it's admirable that you would turn down an opportunity at continuing to control the levers of power
Mm-hmm.
from the West Wing, from 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. And Jared Kushner and Ivanka Trump were the power couple in the first administration of the Trump era. And for them to pass on another turn of making power moves from the West Wing, I think says something about their character. I don't know anybody else who would pass that up. But look, now having said that, I also find it fascinating that in the first term, um, that we didn't see the kind of level of activity or the blur of activity that we're seeing now, right? In Trump's last term, in the first 100 days. Now you can say it's because they didn't know representatives worked or operated or who the players were or the national landscape there, and didn't understand the federal government and its leviathan, and how the entire bureaucracy system worked. And now they do, right? Then now they had a really good understanding as to hit the ground running and go, for the first 100 days. And so I don't think it's because Jared and Ivanka are not in the White House anymore that that maybe they served as a sort of a wet blanket as a cooling plate to a lot of what Donald Trump wanted to do in the first term. But it is fascinating to see
Mm-hmm.
this administration in the second term is doing. I mean, look, Wadi, just really short. The U.S.-Mexico border, that relationship with Claudia Sheinbaum,
Mm-hmm.
has been a revelation on how they've shut it down and is absolutely secure. Trying to resolve the Russia-Ukraine war, the Israel and Gaza situation. Inflation now is down. Energy prices are down. Tax reform is next on the plate. And they're moving hard on that one to make them permanent. DEI is essentially DOA. The whole woke agenda, they've taken it on and they're winning that. They've brought peace to the Middle East seas now, because taking on the Houthis who were taking on, our chips. They've cut wasteful spending like nobody's business. It has been inspiring,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But will we see Jared and Ivanka come back? That remains to be seen, and I wonder what the roles would be different than last time.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
Or even in the future, folks have talked about Don Jr., Ivanka as potential candidates for the presidency or for cabinet positions in the future. But Danny, you just mentioned something. We're probably about 3 to 4 days away from April the 15th, which is tax day. You just mentioned tax reform. It's one of the biggest things on the docket. I know there's been such a focus on tariffs, but sort of not behind the scenes, but going on in Congress. There's a budget being passed. Tax reform is also something that's being discussed. This might be the last tax day that, if Congress does not act, where Americans can see the benefit from those 2017 cuts. How do you see it? What's in the balance? What does Congress need to do on this topic?
Yeah, look, if Congress doesn't act fast, and if they continue to stall on making sure that the tax cuts that were passed in Trump's first term are not extended, or at least are made permanent, in the sense that people will have less money in their pockets at a time, Wadi, that we've gone through 4 years of massive inflation, 4 years of wage stagnation, 4 years of low productivity, low energy production. It has brought a lot of people to their knees, and people are hurting, because they had to pay so much more for eggs, famously, food, gas, rent, medicine. The interest rates were at an 30-year high or 40-year high or something like that, and still are too high for a lot of people to even try to afford a home. So if we now lose $2,000 a year that we have to pay more in taxes per person, again, people are barely making it. This is going to put them under, and I think you're going to see an across the board economic recession, and a lot of pain is going to be caused. But Congress can fix that, and it looks like they're on their way. But we need to do the work, on making sure that these people don't let us down, because they have before, and they'll do it again if we let them, right? But no. The good thing is that this administration is working hard to make sure that the tax cuts are going to be made permanent.
Yeah, very much so. It's one of these topics where the audience really should be paying attention to the details. There's a lot of rhetoric out there. The left is very much saying that this is tax cuts for the rich, that this will only benefit the wealthy. These tax cuts that are going to expire are specifically the middle class tax cuts. I mean, this is the complete opposite of what they have been saying. They're really doing a disservice to the cause. Honestly, this is, if Democrats sort of want to be back in power and want to show that they could lead, this is the one area where I think they could be standing up and saying, we stand behind the extension of tax cuts to the middle class, to many small businesses that would be impacted.
Small businesses, the one that would hurt the most. That's exactly right. It's small business. It's those folks that are barely getting by with a small little profit margin, and you're going to tick up 5 to 6% more in taxes. That'll wipe them out. That'll close their business.
Yeah, 100%. Well, Daniel, that has been our episode for today. A lot of these topics, we're going to continue to cover them as they unfold. Remember to subscribe. We're on Spotify, YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, and X to make sure to stay connected. Until next time, folks.